Hey guys, I just wanted to say what's up real quick and to thank you guys for being so patient. I took an extra class this semester, which was a dumb idea. But anyways, I think just like the little bit of extra stress kind of made my lung problems worse. I do actually have pretty bad lung problems, but I usually can get through it. But this time it kind of kicked my butt. And, just trying to do the channel and my job and then school and deciding to take an extra class on top of my club I already belonged to just kind of kicked my butt. But I think that after a week or two, I'll get used to the extra stuff and I should be uploading like I said. I couldn't help that I was sick, but I'm so glad that you guys are understanding and so supportive. I hope you guys enjoy this. When I was 17, I worked in the local mall at a clothing shop for young girls. And when I say young, I mean that the clothing ranged from baby to tween clothes. It was a somewhat higher end store with a lot of important brand names and obnoxious price tags that made me wonder why anyone would spend that much money on an article of clothing that a child would outgrow in about 6 months. But, of course, it wasn't my place to question our snooty clientele. I can definitely say that it was one of the worst jobs I worked, probably ever, just based on how shitty people treated me. Customers were always looking down their noses at me, demanding I serve them, and then mocking me for it. And, of course, none of them were ever happy. Something was always wrong, and of course, they were always right. I guess maybe customer service just isn't for me. Regardless, when you're a teenager with no real skill set, you don't get a lot of choices as to what job you have, and I figured it was better than working food service. So, I plastered a painful smile on my face every morning and worked with the soccer moms from hell. I saw some strange and unsettling things in my time at the mall. Some overzealous harassing customers, one or two drunks wandering in and getting abrasive, things like that. But nothing can beat what happened on October 11th, which also happens to be the day that I quit that job for good. October 11th. I can admit that all of our staff was frazzled to begin with. As soon as the hell that is back to school season ended, the torture that is Halloween began. We'd start in early September putting out our Halloween costumes and dresses, but the few weeks before Halloween would still be a shit show of angry mothers trying to do some last-minute shopping. I opened the store that morning and we were pretty swamped until about noon, when things, for whatever reason, calmed down just for a bit. In fact, we only had 2 customers come into the store in the span of about an hour. It looked like they were mother and daughter, the mother being in her early to mid-40s and the girl just a little too old to be shopping at our store, maybe 14 or 15. The mother wore conservative clothing in neutral tones and had her hair up in a bun. The daughter was wearing a sweater dress with leggings, her hair drawn up in a ponytail. They introduced themselves as Mrs. Thompson and Lucy, respectively. I'll have to admit, I made a bit of a snap judgment about them the moment they walked in. The clothing they wore seemed, well, most of the people who shopped at our store were fairly wealthy, or at least upper middle class. I figured the moment they looked at the price tags, they'd be out the door and on their way. Instead, they took their time scouting out our store, picking a fluffy orange dress with a happy jack-o'-lantern face printed on it, some white stockings, a pair of black buckle shoes, and an orange headband to match. They were speaking together in hushed tones, their faces grave. They'd been in the store long enough at the point I figured they might actually buy something, so I went over to see if I could get started ringing them up. Mrs. Thompson brought her soon-to-be purchases to the front. They were silent as they handed me the items, and I was beginning to feel a bit uncomfortable. I thought a bit of light conversation would help. "So, who are you buying these for, then? Another daughter?" After all, they were much too small for Lucy. Mrs. Thompson's face faltered, and Lucy turned away. "Ah, yes, these will be for my youngest daughter, Marissa. She loves Halloween." She paused then with a funny look on her face. Lucy grabbed her arm, as if for support. Something was very off about this interaction, but I couldn't figure it out. So I tried to close our pitiful attempt at conversation by saying, "Well, I'm sure she'll love it." With that, Mrs. Thompson's face crumpled, and she began to cry. She buried her face in her hands as Lucy held back her own tears. Finally, Lucy turned towards me and saw the bewilderment written clearly on my face. The clothes, they're for Marissa's funeral this Friday." Oh, fuck. Bewilderment turned to horror as I rushed to apologize for my indiscretion. Mrs. Thompson stopped her tears and waved my concerns away. "Don't be sorry. It isn't your fault. You couldn't have known." I felt so bad for the bereaved mother and daughter that I manipulated the cash register to get them a hell of a discount, throwing in a couple of jack-o'-lantern hair bows for good measure. Miss Thompson and Lucy both thanked me with the utmost sincerity as I bagged their purchases. If they had just left the store at that, my life would have been so much different. I probably would have continued working at the store for the rest of the summer, rather than ending up at McDonald's a few days later. I wouldn't have had to talk to the police. I wouldn't have had to tell them over and over again what I'd seen. But life doesn't always work out that way. Just as Mrs. Thompson grabbed her bag, a little voice rang out in the store. "Mommy, Mommy, did you get it? Did you get my surprise?" A young girl, she couldn't have been more than 6, came running through the front door. Nobody accompanied her, and I was shocked to see that she ran right up to Mrs. Thompson. She must have been waiting at the front of our store for her mom and sister to finish their shopping. Mrs. Thompson lifted the little girl into her arms and handed Lucy the bag. "Yes, baby, I got you your surprise. You're going to be the very cutest girl there ever was." The little girl turned to me and gave me a big, bright smile. She was so darling. A gap between her 2 front teeth and a bottom tooth was missing. "My name is Marissa, and Mommy said I get a birthday party this year. I'm going to be 7. My jaw fell open as Mrs. Thompson cooed over her daughter. The daughter I thought was supposed to be dead? "Yes, baby, we're going to have a big party. All of our family and friends will be there just to see you. Now won't that be nice?" She handed Marissa off to Lucy and then turned towards me. Just before they left the store, she lifted a finger to her lips and glared at me hard. And then they walked out the door and out of my life. I never saw them again. I was so shaken by what had happened, I called the police immediately. My manager thought I was overreacting. "They were probably just lying to you to get some sympathy discount," she scoffed. But something about the way they looked at that little girl reminded me of when sharks circled their prey. The police apparently thought my concerns were valid because they searched high and low for Mrs. Thompson and her daughter, but they were nowhere to be found. They'd paid in cash, and the name Thompson is so common that it was almost certainly a fake name. The officers, after a few weeks of trying to find these people, eventually gave up the search and told me it was probably nothing and that I shouldn't worry about it. The looks on their faces, however, said otherwise. It's been 10 years since the incident, and I've moved on from it. Well, I guess there wasn't anything to move on from. As I got older, I began to think that I must have severely overreacted. After all, I've certainly seen stranger things at the other jobs I've held over the years. But then, something happened. Something that made me think back on that day and relive that awful memory. It was actually a news story from a city about 50 miles from my hometown. It just so happened to show up on my Facebook feed. I wouldn't have clicked on it, but for the fact that I recognized the face staring back at me. The little girl with the gap in her front teeth and the missing bottom tooth. The headline to the article cried out, 10-year anniversary of local girl's tragic accident. I skimmed the story just enough to get the gist of what happened. She fell down the stairs one night, trying to get a glass of water from the kitchen. Her mother and sister were so distraught when they called the police, they said. The most tragic of all, it happened just a few days before her 7th birthday, they said. And so here I sit, torn between calling the local police or downing another shot of whiskey, trying to wash the memory from my brain. But I don't think I'll ever scrub away the image of a child-sized coffin and the little girl who surely lies inside it.